have fun watching, and I'll see you again at the end of the video. All my sources will be linked down below. If you learned something from this, leave a comment down below, and if you do want me to cover any other topic, also leave a comment down below, and enjoy! In episode 8, minute 29 of Stranger Things, we see, spoiler alert, mute this and close your eyes if you don't want to know, we see the protagonist making a plan to defeat evil. The scene shows Max saying how she'll stop listening to Running Up That Hill to allow Vecna to possess her mind. What does this have to do with background noise? It's actually a pretty good analogy, so keep this in mind towards the end of the video, and I promise it will make a lot of sense. Nancy, another protagonist, describes the song as a lifeline back to reality. Outkast rapper Big Boy talked about Running Up That Hill in a video discussing how the song makes listeners feel like they can envision their own world that they can run to. After being possessed and trapped in the Upside Down, the song starts playing in the distance, and Max, hearing it, is able to get out from a portal that allows her to escape. This is the perfect way to describe the role of background noise in our everyday lives, music being the background noise and Vecna being the intrusive and unwanted thoughts. But again, this will make so much more sense in just a little bit. Stay with me. Did you know that hearing still works while you sleep? Picture this, you have a big day tomorrow, you went to bed earlier than usual to rest your mind and relax your body, and now it's 3 a.m. in the morning and you don't know why or how, but for some reason you're awake. Why? When a noise wakes you up in the night, the blame is not to be put on the noise itself, but on the change that it produces in the sounds of your environment. In other words, had you been in a perfectly silent room, then it would have been the absence of that silence to have woken you up. Light sleepers can easily detect this frustrating change, causing them to wake up. This also explains why the sound of someone snoring won't make you sleep well, but a white noise machine might. Snoring goes up and down in tone, while white noise is instead constant. But what do I mean by that? What even is white noise, and why does it differ from pink or brown or purple noise? Well, all of these noises belong to the background noise category, but anything can classify really. I myself often fall asleep with YouTube or Netflix playing in the background. But before we get there, let's take a better look at how white noise works, as to better understand why some people crave background noises, not just when they sleep, but in everyday life as well. Don't worry, you're not the only person that can't fall asleep without background noises. There is a whole business behind noise sleeping sounds, and the market share is big. To give you an example, Apple just recently released a function called background noise, and here's how to activate it, just in case you were wondering. Technically speaking, white noise is a sound emitting many frequencies that are all equally intense. What does that mean? Think of it as a band composed of many members, each playing a different note at the same time, and make that note last indefinitely, and you just got yourself some white noise. Compared to white noise, lower frequencies are dominant in pink noise and higher frequencies prevail in brown. The former produces a more calming sound, think of it as rain falling. The latter is instead more coarse, like a waterfall. All of these noises have been proven to increase our focus, strengthen our memory, and of course, allow for a better, more relaxed sleep. Which one will help you sleep better? Well, that's for you to find out, because the answer varies from person to person. So, want to sleep better? Make some noise. But of course, not everyone needs noise to sleep. Instead of hearing white noise as a whole, certain individuals will be distracted by one or more of the many underlying notes playing, more than they'll be distracted by the occasional absence of silence, thus nullifying the purpose of the machine. But white noise is certainly not the only background noise out there. In this HuffPost article, the author starts off by saying, "If you see me in the car not listening to music, you should check on me." And boy, that sentence hit home. We had never met anybody who enters their car, turns on the engine, and drives off without either connecting Bluetooth or at least having some random radio station playing, even when the sound is super low. And if you have, well, then Weirdo. Jokes aside though, most people have something playing in the background when they cook, clean, take a shower, travel, hang out, in the elevator, romantic situation, in shopping malls, even as they sleep, like we've seen earlier. And while it's okay to do that sometimes, the constant need to always have something playing in the background may be hiding a problem. How? Let's dig a little deeper and find out together. Think of your attention as a flashlight in a dark room. If you turn it on, you will light up the whole room. But if you put a magnifying glass in front of it, you'll get a light beam pointing to wherever you decide to aim. The same things happens with your attention. You can either choose to direct it to a specific thought or idea, otherwise it will scatter everywhere around you. Sometimes we can focus so hard on one thought or a task, for example when we read, follow a video along, get lost in a movie or a project at work, that we won't even notice whatever else may be going on. Other times, when we're trying to fall asleep, for example, and our attention is free to roam, it will be much harder not to get distracted by intrusive thoughts or noises. And here's where background noises, including white noise machines, may come in handy. By steering that mental light towards a distraction, we can avoid overthinking about anxieties or ideas that prevent us from falling asleep. But this begs to be asked, to what extent is it healthy to distract yourself from reality, and how long can that really last? What happens when the background noise stops? Background noise can be a great distraction, a means to muffle certain thoughts and help keep emotion under control when feeling overwhelmed. But we need to make a fundamental distinction here. There are functional bad thoughts and irrational bad thoughts. And while one is okay to ignore, we must avoid doing the same with the other. It is not healthy to adopt this coping mechanism when a functional thought arises. Blocking out functional thoughts, ignoring and never addressing them at all is detrimental, because by doing so we impede ourselves from processing and therefore resolving whatever problem we're bottling up, and all the feelings, whether good or bad, that may come with it. All avoidance does is increase the anxiety that we get from avoiding things. Say that again. All avoidance does is increase the anxiety that we get from avoiding things. If we keep sweeping problems under the rug, the carpet might look fine at first, but eventually the dust will pile up, and with the right trigger, it will end up scattered absolutely everywhere. Because to remain on this analogy, hiding the dust won't make it go away. Now, for all my overthinkers in the back, this one's for you. So, now that we know what not to do with functional thoughts, then what about intrusive or irrational thoughts? Let's see. Have you ever gotten a song stuck in your head? You keep playing it or find yourself singing it under the shower and okay, that's pretty harmless. But the same can't be said when instead of a song, this happens with a thought or idea. When I was in the 3rd grade, I was taught how a cow's digestive system works. And you probably were too. But if you don't remember, let me refresh your mind. And again, stay with me because this will all make sense, I promise. Here's what that looks like. The same process that happens inside that cow also happens in our minds sometimes, and that's called ruminative thinking. Distressing thoughts looping on repeat and turning into cycles that's extremely hard to break out of. Replaying past scenarios, intrusive thinking, irrational thoughts, dwelling over problems that are out of your control, worrying about the uncertainty of the future. This is not only time-consuming, but can also be nerve-wracking. Furthermore, most people don't realize they're doing it, so how can we? Consciousness and compliance are key. These two components are also of use when it comes to distinguishing thought types from one another. We should ask ourselves, is this a thought I'm having or am I actively thinking? And what's the difference? When you have a thought, it simply crosses your mind and then leaves. An example will be thinking, oh, I'm hungry. So you acknowledge that and you go get yourself some food. Actively thinking instead is when you have a thought, but instead of simply observing it, you examine it, expand it, twist it around, look at it from different perspectives, and so on. An example would be, oh no, remember when I called the teacher mom in grade 5 and Karen mocked me in front of everyone? I wish I could just go back in time and erase that day from existence and yeah, you get the gist. Think of thoughts as boxes in your mind. Sometimes a new box will get delivered inside your head. Now, you can either choose to acknowledge that box, read its label, and then go about your day, or you can stop by the box, hold it up, shake it, maybe even open it and try to see what's inside, interacting with whatever you find. If we find ourselves in the second case scenario, then there are some steps that we can take to interrupt that dangerous thinking pattern. 1. Identify the underlying topic. Let's say we're still thinking about Karen. 2. Question the topic. Like, what would have happened had I not called the teacher mom that day? What were my other classmates thinking when they saw me embarrass myself that way? And so on. 3. Question yourself. How are these thoughts useful to me? Are these questions solving my problem? Are these questions something that I'll ever be able to find an answer for or that will fix the past? Are they of any use to my day-to-day life? Or are they just making me more anxious? Am I actually going to resolve anything by dwelling over these things? 4. Take that magnifying glass that we talked about earlier and shift your mental light elsewhere. Put on some background noise as you clean your office or listen to music, read a book, paint, or engage in any activity that will help distract you. You could also try to stop yourself from thinking without doing any of these things, but it's just easier if you have something to direct your attention to. 5. Don't expect these thoughts to never come up again, because likely they will. Just learn how to recognize them better. 6. Remember that the harder you try not to think about something, the more you will end up thinking about it. So if you need to, give yourself some time to think these thoughts, but set a boundary as to avoid getting caught up. For example, limit yourself to a 5 or 10 minute time period if you must. 7. And last, ultimately, the only thing that matters most when it comes to fighting these thoughts is your own willpower. So make sure that if you're not in the right headspace, then you seek for medical help, because these thoughts may take over your life and develop into something worse if you let them. So, now that you can identify and handle irrational thoughts you might have, what happens when you're faced with functional thoughts instead? How should you address those instead of hiding them under a rug? And how can background noise make the situation better or worse? We have to ask ourselves, is background noise all I'm doing to resolve this issue? If the answer is yes, then this is when the coping mechanism is doing more harm than good. The key is balance. Some distraction is good, but if that's ultimately the only thing you do without ever addressing your problems and emotion like we mentioned earlier, then this will only end up making the situation worse. It's understandable to want to avoid negative emotions, however, you must feel it to heal it. Once we're sure that we're not ruminating and that this problem can actively be solved, then there are some steps that we can take to plan things out and face things heads on. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Studies found that imagining a fear event can actually reduce the anxiety. Mindfulness. Let the boxes that we mentioned earlier come in, but don't react to them. Here's an example. A new box enters your mind. Label says, my boss was a jerk the other day. Now, acknowledge that, focus on your breath, identify the way you might be feeling, for example, sadness or anger, but do not express any further opinions or judgments. Leave the box where it is and move on. This will help you be less reactive, more tolerating, and thus less worried about eventually facing the problem. If you're in public, although you can do this when you're on your own as well, and start to feel overwhelmed, try the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. List 5 things you see, 4 things you touch, 3 things you hear, 2 things you smell, and 1 that you can taste. This can help resize your thought and act as an anchor for the present. To conclude, background noise can be a good thing, but not if you're using it to run away from your problems. If that's the case, then maybe try looking for a new coping mechanism. So thank you so much for clicking on the video. Please leave a like or subscribe. What the shit is that? Stop.